age where social media dominates our daily lives, the evolution of online dating has come a long way from websites promising to match you with your true love to quick and easy apps, allowing us to search for a date with a mere swipe. The online dating world has brought joy to many, but for this case, it turned into tragedy. Grace Millane was a bright, outgoing and loving 21-year-old from Essex, England. She'd just graduated from Lincoln University with a degree in advertising and marketing in September 2018. Like many students, Grace decided to grab her backpack and spend a year travelling the world. With flights booked, Grace said goodbye to her family and friends and set off for South America, arriving in October and spending 6 weeks hiking around Peru. The next stop was Auckland, New Zealand, where she arrived in November and found herself at the base backpackers hostel. Grace made sure to check in with her family and friends, sharing the many pictures of her adventures. She was travelling alone and keen to enjoy her gap year travels. She frequented the dating app Tinder. Now, Tinder is a very popular dating app with over 50 million users. You upload pictures and scroll through pictures of potential matches. If you see one you like, you simply swipe. If the corresponding party also swipes in your image, you are declared a match and can communicate with each other via messaging. After scrolling through Tinder, Grace matched with a 26-year-old New Zealander and decided to meet up with him. She excitedly left her hostel on December the 1st, the eve of her 22nd birthday, and made her way to the Sky City Casino foyer to meet her Tinder match. Grace took a picture of the Christmas decorations and sent it to her parents while she anticipated her date's arrival. She'd let her friend know she was meeting someone and chose a busy location, but alone, in a foreign country, Grace had left herself vulnerable. At 5:40 p.m, Tinder match Jesse Kempson casually strolls up to Grace. They recognise each other instantly and the pair hug. For the next few hours, the pair are spotted visiting various hotspots in the town, downing cocktails and tequilas and seemingly enjoying each other's company. At one point, Grace is seen using her phone. She messages her friend to tell her that she feels as though she's clicked with her date. He's a manager of an oil company, and it's going well. The pair continue drinking at the local bars, laughing and eventually kissing, but whilst Grace's purse is left unattended, weirdly, Kempson is spotted rifling through it. At around 9:30 p.m, the pair are seen walking towards Kempson's apartment in the nearby City Life Hotel. Grace Millane would never be seen again. Jesse Kempson had quite the past. Once an aspiring softball player, the divorce of his parents meant his grandparents were tasked with raising him before moving to Australia as a teen and living with his mother. As he grew older, his relationships with family and friends had begun to break down, leading him to become estranged from them. He'd never held down a job for very long. He'd just been sacked from his last job as a salesperson because he'd been caught creating fictitious accounts to falsely claim commission. His hotel studio apartment was paid for by the state. On the outside, Kempson was a well-dressed, charming man, but his past was riddled with accusations of fraud and deceit. Kempson had a penchant for making up outrageous stories, claiming to be a professional softball player, an affluent restaurant owner, a lawyer, and even told one date he had cancer. Grace's 22nd birthday comes around. Friends and family become increasingly concerned when she fails to respond to birthday messages. Just after 8 a.m. the next day, Kempson leaves his apartment and heads to the nearby shopping precinct, where he purchases a suitcase and some cleaning supplies. He then gets in a taxi and heads to the local car rental and hires a red Toyota. He gets dressed up and goes out on another Tinder date at a local bar. The woman chats with Kempson over drinks, but his strange conversations about police and how a friend of his had accidentally murdered someone made her feel uneasy. She makes her excuses and leaves. He then carries on with his busy day and heads out on yet another store trip. This time he hires a professional carpet cleaning machine and returns it a couple hours later, telling the store person that he has a large red wine stain to remove. Later that evening, he grabs one of the hotel's luggage carts, takes it up to his apartment and loads it with 2 suitcases and a sports bag. After putting the bags into the Toyota parked outside, he then moves the car to a nearby car park. The following day, at bright and early, he drives to a DIY store in West Auckland and purchases a shovel. Paying in cash, he then drives to the Wakatakia Ranges, a regional park located 40 miles from Auckland's city centre. A couple hours later, he's back at the hotel, without the suitcase and strangely without shoes either. He's then spotted leaving the hotel with a bag of clothes and a black refuse sack. He makes his way to the dry cleaners, where he now only has 1 bag of clothes and hands them to be dry cleaned. He would then return with the sports bag and then hands that in to be dry cleaned. He later drives to a retail complex in the city and purchases an identical suitcase to the one he'd previously purchased. He then heads across the road to a car wash where he disposes of the shovel and cleans the car, then takes a pair of muddy shoes out of the boot and blasts them clean with a jet wash. Kempson then visits a local park. After wandering around, he empties the contents of the sports bag into a park bin and leaves. It's now 6 days since anyone has heard from Grace. Her distraught father makes an emotional plea for any information regarding her disappearance.
I would like to take this opportunity to appeal to anybody who has seen, spoken to or come into contact with Grace over the last few days, and to come forward with any detail, no matter how small, and contact the investigation team.
December the 8th. After reviewing Grace's social media, Auckland detectives notice a message left on Grace's Facebook by Kempson on the evening of their date. Searching through hours and hours of CCTV footage, they begin to piece together Grace's actions the evening of her disappearance. After being informally questioned by police, Kempson is taken into the local police station and interviewed. He insists that after meeting Grace, they'd parted company that evening and he'd gone to meet up with a work colleague at another bar.
How did the evening pan out?
Yeah, pretty good.
We actually don't know if she's been murdered or not yet. She may be alive and well.
Okay.
But she might also be dead.
Okay.
Okay? And it could be that you've done it.
Hey, I just want to ask a question. Am I being arrested for something I didn't do?
You haven't been arrested, mate.
Oh.
No.
Oh, sorry.
When asked about purchasing a suitcase, he told them it was still in his hotel room, but they didn't know he'd purchased 2 identical cases.
I'm telling you, that bag is still in my room.
What's in it?
Nothing. Nothing's in it.
What was in it then?
Nothing.
Where did it come from?
The warehouse.
Which warehouse?
Atrium.
The following day, Kempson is presented with images of him and Grace in the hotel elevator. Realising he can't talk his way out of this situation, and with a lawyer present, he confesses to murdering Grace.
You've indicated that you're willing to
speak to us about the events of last Saturday. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me what happened last Saturday.
From the beginning.
Yeah. Jesse Kempson, you're under arrest for the murder of Grace Millane.
Insisting that this was a consensual sexual act gone awry. He would claim that Grace told him she was a fan of 50 Shades of Grey and that she was encouraging Kempson to engage in erotic asphyxiation, but something had gone wrong and he'd accidentally killed her. He told police where they could find her body. They find Grace's naked body forced into a fetal position inside of Kempson's suitcase, crudely buried in the Wakatakia Range. Forensic examination would show that Grace died from strangulation, but her body displayed bruising around her arms and thighs, showing that she'd been held down with great force. Grace's nose had bled. They determined this as a result of the pressure placed upon her neck. It would have taken Grace up to 10 minutes to die this way. Grace's body had no defensive wounds, nor did Kempson's, but his large build dominated Grace's smaller stature. The extent of Grace's injuries leads investigators to suspect that this was more than sexual misadventure. Her blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit at the time of post-mortem, 8 days after her murder. As Grace's family deal with the devastating news, Kempson continues to plead the murder was accidental, but the evidence begins to stack heavily against him. Forensics discover large patches of blood in Kempson's apartment. Despite his thorough cleaning, the luminol told a far more sinister event occurred. They search his cell phone, and at around 1:30 a.m, after murdering Grace, he'd searched Wakatakia Ranges and Hottest Fire, then taken a series of illicit images of Grace's body post-mortem, crudely posing her lifeless body. He then accessed porn websites until 2:20 a.m. His cell activity goes quiet until 6 a.m. He began searching for cleaning products and large bags before arranging a Tinder date for later that day, whilst Grace's body lay in his room. Kempson's identity is protected by a court order whilst awaiting trial for Grace's murder. No media is legally allowed to uncover his identity. The reason for this soon becomes apparent. Kempson is already awaiting trial for the physical assault and abuse of a former girlfriend, and following his arrest, a British traveller identified Kempson via the media coverage as the man who had raped her. Despite his face being blurred, she was able to recognise him. Kempson's trial is a traumatic experience for Grace's family. They travelled all the way from England to Auckland to face their daughter's murderer. His defence tries to defame Grace's character, alleging she was an active member of BDSM online groups, as if somehow that makes a reasonable defence for Kempson's actions. The defence even called one of Grace's former partners to testify that the couple had engaged in sexual strangulation during their relationship, but the former partner testified they'd used a safe word and tap-out system for safety. Grace's visibly upset mother had to leave the court when the images of her daughter's body taken by Kempson were shown. The trial was becoming extremely harrowing for the Millane family. The defence continued to push the narrative that Grace's death was nothing more than sexual misadventure, that she set out that evening to partake in sexual activity with Kempson, using the CCTV of them kissing and hugging as confirmation that Grace was sexually adventurous. She was a 21-year-old woman who had barely begun to live her life. Was she the risk-taking vixen the defence wanted to portray? The prosecution was able to sway the jury, portraying Kempson as the cold, calculated killer that he was. When presented with the evidence, they were able to show Kempson cleaned up and disposed of Grace's body without an ounce of remorse. In fact, within hours of Grace's murder, he'd devised and executed a complete plan to eradicate all evidence of the crime. Even the hire car had been rehired to another party before the police were able to seize it for evidence. His apartment, to the naked eye, was spotless, and no DNA of his was found on Grace's body. Her clothes and purse were never found. Kempson, of course, overlooked one major aspect, and that was the CCTV. The City Life Hotel alone had 19 high-quality cameras, and his comment on Grace's Facebook led police straight to him.
Jesse Shane Kempson, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
The jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 17 years to be served. Combined with the evidence from the rape trial and the harrowing testimony his former girlfriend gave, recalling the abuse she received at his hands, a further 7 years custodial sentence was added to the 17 years to be served. After a failed appeal, on the 22nd of December 2020, the court lifted the ban protecting his identity.
Full of shit, mate. You have no reason to convict me. You're full of shit.
Kempson was a fantasist who actively used Tinder to seek women for sexual gratification. He never apologised to Grace's family nor his victims. Grace was on an adventure and Kempson was a predator. Everything about him was a fabrication. He told Grace he was a manager of an oil company and would be travelling to London the following year, conveniently when she would be returning back home for a family occasion. He was able to make Grace believe they had a connection. She told her friend he was encouraging her to drink plenty to celebrate her birthday. To some, a purely innocent and fun thing to do, but for Kempson, this was part of his evil plan. Just the day previous to meeting up with Kempson, Grace had met up with a guy through Facebook. They met at the backpack hostel before going back to his apartment. In a way, this had probably made Grace more trusting. In the message exchange between Kempson and Grace late on Friday evening, it would be Kempson pushing for them to meet, even offering to pay for the evening. Grace's legacy, however, has helped bring attention to a rising problem that's known as the 50 Shades defence. New Zealand has one of the highest rates of family abuse in the world, but domestic violence is a worldwide issue, and a rising number of murderers, like Kempson, are using the sexual misadventure ruse as a defence in court. A lesser charge of manslaughter versus murder means a significantly shorter sentence. All the defendant needs to do is convince the jury their victim actively enjoyed risky sexual activity and the death was nothing more than a tragic accident. There is little evidence available to prove to a court what a couple do in the privacy of their relationship, or if it's consensual, because partaking in any type of sexual activity involving pressure on the neck can be extremely dangerous and can cause complications such as brain damage, stroke and even death, paving the way for murderers and abusers to claim their victim's death was nothing more than an accident. So much so that in 2019, New Zealand classified non-fatal strangulation as a crime punishable of up to 7 years in prison. The biggest travesty with the 50 Shades defence is the fact that Grace Millane's family not only had to deal with the loss of their daughter, but had to endure a court trial in which their daughter's sex life, her naked images and gruesome death were publicised, whilst Kempson's identity was protected. New Zealand mourned side by side with the Millane family. Even their Prime Minister made a public apology for Grace's murder.
They've opened their hearts to Grace and her family. I cannot express our gratitude enough for all the offers and gifts of kindness that we've received over the last year. Finally, we must return home and try and pick up the pieces of our lives and day to day with our beloved Grace. Thank you all.
Be careful who you match with.